No, I'm probably.
It kind of depends on the rep. Cole kind of would switch between doing tenor and bass because some of the music was written for tenor.
That's probably what I was.
Yeah.
It hasn't been.
No, we didn't get a chance to play that one. We did a lot of music on the press release. We didn't do as much. I want to try to do more like string quartet arrangements. That was that year 2019 to 2020, so the entire second half.
Did you get a hold of Restoration?
I wanted to do that so bad.
Good morning and happy Easter. Welcome to the First Unitarian Society of Madison. My name is Kelly Crocker and I'm one of the ministers here. Today I'm joined by my colleague, the Reverend Kelly Asprooth-Jackson, along with the worship team of Linda Warren, Heather Thorpe, Drew Collins, Daniel Carnes, and Stephen Gregorius. The vision of First Unitarian Society is growing souls, connecting with one another, and embodying our Unitarian Universalist values in our lives, in our community, and in our world. If you're visiting with us today, welcome. We are so very glad that you are here. If you'd like more information about First Unitarian Society, our activities and programs, we invite you to join us at the welcome table directly across from these center doors. Also at the welcome table today, Roz Woodward will be there with sign-ups for our annual peace polls that are put up over Mother's Day. So if you'd like more information about those or find out anything about it or sign up to make one yourself, please see Roz at the welcome table. And for those connecting virtually with us today, we are so glad that you are with us as well. We hope you'll be able to join us for our virtual coffee hour after today's service. The information for joining can be found on the homepage of our website, fusmadison.org, and will also be seen on the slide shown again after today's service. And now, I invite you to join me in a moment of silence as we center ourselves and bring ourselves fully into this time and place as we join together once again in community. Out of the earth rises light, rises life, rises spring.
May we join with the miracle that is springtime and enter into life with lightness and joy.
Out of the Spirit rises faith, rises hope, rises love.
May we join with the miracle that is Easter time and enter into life with hope and love. Let us resurrect with spring. Let us resurrect with the Spirit and enter into renewed life as we gather into our time of worship together this Easter morning.
And if you will rise in all the ways we do and join together in our words of affirmation as we light our chalice. Our souls speak spring. Our souls speak green shoots pushing through last year's leaves. Our souls speak flower buds stretching to sun. Our souls speak mud puddle and nest building, damp earth and worm castings, tiny green leaves and frog choruses. We speak spring because spring sings in us. We gather to nurture our faith in our own growing, our own courage to push through, our own blossoming in beauty, our own small part in the spring of this world.
Please remain standing and sing with me our response to the chalice lighting. Light shine in, illuminate our inward view, help us to see with clarity. Shine bright and true, so we may join our songs in new songs that become full symphony. And now let us sing the great Easter hymn, number 61, Lo, the earth awakes again.
So who knows what holiday it is today? Anybody? Easter. So I heard Easter, and that's definitely a correct answer. I heard Ramadan. Thank you so much for acknowledging that. So it is the and Passover. Great. Okay, so I heard the three that I was looking for. Maybe there are other answers, but those are the three that I had in mind. So Easter, as a reminder, is generally agreed to be the holiest day in the Christian tradition. Ramadan is the holiest month in the Muslim tradition, and Passover, Pesach, is the most celebrated holiday in the Jewish tradition. So if you were greeted this morning with a happy Easter, that's why. If you happen to be greeted at some point, we're still in the middle of it, so you got more time for Ramadan, with a Ramadan Mubarak, the most common response to that is Ramadan Kareem. So there you go. You know that if that comes up in your daily life. And there are a number of greetings we could share for Passover, and probably the most common one is Hag Pesach Sameach, a good Passover to you. So we're going to hear more about the story of Passover. It's a pretty long story later in the service, but I want to take some time right now to tell just a little piece of that story together with you. And we're all going to tell the story together. So toward that end, I wonder if I could get just a few volunteers, a few brave souls, if you're willing to come up here and stand with me and be the children of Israel. Is there anybody who's willing to do that? Please, yes, come right up. Come right up. As many as you'd like, but we don't need that many either. Yep. Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming up to be the children of Israel. So, the story goes that the children of Israel lived in slavery in Egypt. I appreciate it. Yes, you understood the assignment. Great. They lived in slavery in Egypt, and through a long series of events and hard work, they managed to get free. And it was such a close-run thing, they were so worried that the whole thing was going to get reversed on them, that they had to leave Egypt so quickly, they didn't even have time to let their bread rise. So all they had to eat were very dry crackers. It's okay to not feel excited about the crackers. That's the point of the story. So, your folks, you just got free, and all you have to eat is some dry crackers. But not only that, friends, they get out into the desert, they're running for freedom, and what do they meet but the sea? And so everybody else here, I'm going to ask you to be the sea for me. That means that if you feel like you can sway your arms back and forth, that's great. If that doesn't work for you and just want to sway your body a little bit, that's also great. If you want to go like this and maybe make some fish noises, blah, 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 that's also great. If you are only comfortable just sitting still where you are, that's fine too. There are rocks at the bottom of the ocean. That's not a problem. You're still part of it. And here's where I'm going to ask for just one more high-risk volunteer set, if you're willing to. If anybody's willing to move into the center aisle so we have a continuous sea, right? Because right now there's just the sea in the way of the children of Israel. Perfect. This is ideal. Yes, wonderful. Great sea movements. I'm really impressed. So here we are, the children of Israel at the edge of the sea, and on the other side is freedom. Somehow they have to get from here to there, and they've got no boats. So the story goes, this is what's going to happen. It hasn't happened yet. The story goes that the sea parted and made way so that they could cross to the other side. But one of the ways the story goes is that it didn't part until the children of Israel actually got into the sea. So if I could have children of Israel, if you'd be willing to walk right up to the sea, and it's still swirling, and the fish are still swimming, and only just as they're getting their feet wet does the sea part and spread apart. And they walked out into the ocean dry-footed. Imagine that. You can still keep moving. The ocean's still there, right? The sea's still going on. Looking around one side and the other, seeing the fish swim through the walls of water on either side of them. How long was it going to stay there? Would it hold long enough to get to the other side? And it did. So the story goes. They got to the other side. Thank you very much, children of Israel. You did a great job. They got to the other side. The walls of water closed behind them, and they were so glad to be free, so grateful for the miracle that had allowed them to escape from captivity, that what did they do? They celebrated. And how else would they celebrate but with music?
And I now invite you into a time of giving and receiving where we give freely and generously to this offering, which sustains our community here and also supports the work of our outreach offering recipient. This week's offering will be shared with the Wisconsin Network for Peace and Justice. Wisconsin Network for Peace and Justice was founded in 1991 as a coalition of activist groups and citizens of conscience within Wisconsin. It works to advance a sustainable world free from violence and injustice by connecting, engaging, and strengthening member groups and serving as a catalyst for community organizing and education. You will see on your screen that you can donate directly from our website, fusmadison.org. You will see our text to give information there as well. There are also baskets here at the doors. We thank you for your generosity and your faith in this life we create together.
There is a story about a little squirrel who stored up nuts for the winter by squeezing them through a small hole in a hollow tree. Through coincidence and tragic misunderstanding, that squirrel found himself forced through that very same hole and fell onto a pile of his own nuts. Down in the dark, he was far removed from his life in the forest. He couldn't hear the birds or play among the tree branches or see his beloved squirrel life partner. But the prospect of squeezing back through that tiny hole did not sound easy. And there were all those nuts to eat, at least. Sometimes the only way forward is along a slim and treacherous path. And when that is the case, it can be tempting to ask, what's so great about going forward anyhow? Today is the second day of the Jewish festival of Passover. And in that story, the tale of the ancient Israelites escaping from Egypt, things start out very bad from almost the very beginning. The book of Exodus begins with the Hebrew people living in the land of Egypt as guests, honored for the wise and generous leadership of their ancestor, Joseph. But then, years passed, 60 or 80, perhaps 100 at the outside, and as the story goes, there arose a generation that knew not Joseph. Out of hatred, ignorance, and fear, the Pharaoh who ruled in Egypt decreed that the Hebrews should be slaves. Their freedom was stolen from them, and they were put to work at hard labor, under cruel conditions, subject to the threat of death for resisting their oppression or simply offending their oppressors by their very existence. This had been their terrible condition for generations by the time that Moses, the prophet charged with their liberation, was born among them. And he would not go to Pharaoh and demand freedom for his people until he was 80 years old. According to the story, altogether, the people spent 430 years living in Egypt. Yet it is only in the final decades, perhaps even in the very last year of their captivity, that, as Exodus puts it, the Hebrews groaned under the weight of their bondage and cried out, and their cry for help rose up to God, and God took notice of them. Now, whether we believe that the God who liberated the Hebrews was a literal cosmic being or the spirit which yearns for freedom inside of every human heart, or for that matter, if we see no reason to have to decide between the two, the people still spent centuries under Egypt's terrible lash. The wait for liberation can be a long one, but arriving at that destination requires a constant, creative resistance. In the Exodus story, Moses' mother refuses to surrender her newborn son to a cruel edict from the authorities, placing him in a basket to float away on the river instead. It is her refusal to obey a monstrous and inhumane order that allows her son to grow to become the prophet that he will be. Without smaller acts, grounded in compassion for individual lives, the freedom of the whole can never be achieved. But when Moses did finally come to Pharaoh and present the demand for his people's liberation after the 10 plagues that followed, when the Israelites set out from bondage, a whole new collection of problems began. There was little to eat, and the desert was dangerous. A generous estimate of their route from the ancient Egyptian city of Ramses to the east bank of the Jordan River near Jericho would have a distance of about 300 miles. It took them 40 years to complete it. So it is understandable that some folks complained and asked, why did we leave? Even if we did not have our freedom in Egypt, we were fed. The word in Hebrew for Egypt is Mitzrayim, which means literally a narrow place. The hardship and trial of the escape and the wandering that followed speak to an all too universal truth. Liberation is never cheaply bought. It is always a struggle to become free. The story of Exodus, the story of Passover, is the creation story of Judaism itself. It establishes many of the religion's most important commandments: to welcome the stranger, to set free the captive, to pursue justice until true peace is finally achieved. So the tradition understands the passage through that narrow place as a birth. Just as each of us had to pass through a narrow opening in order to leave the bodies of our mothers behind and enter the world as beings unto ourselves. Now, the Easter story, as it is told in the Gospel of Mark, the eldest of the four canonical Gospels, has the same sort of peril and woe in its final chapter that Exodus establishes in its first. Presumably, you know the basic story. Jesus of Nazareth preached for a little while in the Galilee and in Judea. He taught peace between the neighbors and justice for the poor. He proclaimed a kingdom built not by war, but from loving kindness. And something in that teaching made the greatest empire of his age very, very scared. In the last pages of the book of Mark, the teacher Jesus has been murdered by a heartless, fearful empire, and his body laid to rest in a tomb. But when 3 women from among his students go to visit his gravesite, they find the tomb is open. The body is not there, and a stranger is waiting for them with a message. "Do not be amazed," he says. "You seek Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. He is going before you to Galilee." Galilee, where Jesus' public ministry began, with his teaching of peace in a time of violence, generosity in a time of greed, and compassion and solidarity in a country brutalized by occupation. In the earliest versions of Mark, this is where the story ends. The women at the tomb receive the message but tell no one of it. In the course of any struggle towards what is right, there will be setbacks, sometimes truly awful ones. When the crisis strikes and leaves us staggering, sometimes the best thing that we can do is to go back to the beginning, to reform and regroup and begin to rebuild hope and possibility one bit at a time, starting from our own first principles. The only time the story of a struggle against injustice can ever truly end unsatisfied is if we get knocked down but refuse to get back up and start over. But let's go back a moment to the women at the tomb. The women who were closest to Jesus, some of his students and his mother, who went there to where he was buried as part of their way of saying goodbye. For the most part, no one wants to be overwhelmingly sad, to be stricken with grief and stuck in one place. But when we lose someone we truly love, there is a powerful gravity to the sorrow that pulls us and holds us in. And in this way, the hope of the people who had followed Jesus was all bound up and restricted by grief. And it all fit into that cave. The women went there, and they entered through a narrow place. And they came back out the same way. But something was different. Whatever they saw, whatever they heard, whatever they experienced there, though it has been argued about and fought over for centuries, is wildly beside the point. What matters is not whether there was some miracle, some hallucination, some invention, though people have killed each other for all three arguments these past 2,000 years. Whatever those women found in the cave, they returned to their community with glad news. The kingdom is still among us. The teaching need not die with the teacher. Out of a dark place, through a narrow opening, hope re-entered their lives. Both Passover and Easter arrive each year around the same time as spring in most of the northern hemisphere. Both stories are matched to the motions of the natural world. The narrow, constricted experience of winter giving way to the resurgent possibilities of new growth and life. The poet Ross Gay writes of how noticing the small and subtle signals of the changes in the season can help awaken us to the reopening of spring, just as how attending to the tiniest gifts of life can help expand our perspective on the world. He writes, "No matter the pull toward brink, no matter the florid, deep sleep awaits, there is a time for everything. Look, just this morning a vulture nodded his red, grizzled head at me, and I looked at him, admiring the sickle of his beak. Then the wind kicked up and arranging that good suit of feathers, he up and took off, just like that. And to boot, there are on this planet alone something like 2 million naturally occurring sweet things, with some names so generous as to kick the steel from my knees: agave, persimmon, stickball, the purple okra I bought for $2 at the market. Think of that! The long night, the skeleton in the mirror, the man behind me on the bus taking notes. Yeah, but look, my niece is running through a field calling my name. My neighbor sings like an angel, and at the end of my block is a basketball court. I remember my color's green. I'm spring. But of course, the progression of the seasons is not completely immutable. And spring does not always arrive just when we would wish for it to. Yeah? Amen. Not in our world and not in our hearts. In the 1800s, there were 2 massive volcanic eruptions in Southeast Asia, one in 1815 and one in 1883. Both belched so much ash into the atmosphere that weather systems all over the world were changed. The temperature of the entire planet was diminished. Farms all over the northern hemisphere suffered, and food scarcity became a problem. 1816 was known in Europe as the year without a summer. Skies were darkened for years afterward. All that ash hanging in the atmosphere also made for incredible sunsets, adding new colors, making older ones more vibrant. Artists took note, and they painted what they saw. In fact, the eruption of 1883 is now thought to have been an important influence on the school of Impressionism, as painters experimented with new styles and techniques in an attempt to do justice to a spectacle that they had literally never seen before. The absence of a summer was no excuse to neglect beauty. In fact, it is precisely when things seem dire or forlorn that we need the creative power of art, fostered by the unique inspiration that a time of crisis can provide. The wrong cannot be made right without some manner of creativity. So all creativity becomes a life-saving practice. Of course, the environmental concerns of our era are quite the reverse from the year without a summer. The great narrowness of our age is one in which we are collectively bound up into the same destructive cycles of exploitation and oppression that keep many poor and a few rich, many anxious and a few comfortable, and all of us toiling upon a world whose seasons grow warmer and more chaotic each year. Dismantling these interlocking systems requires us to push past our own complacency, to move through our own grief and engage our own miraculous creativity. It can feel impossible to imagine such a transformation. That's what it means to be in a narrow place. But in truth, there are countless opportunities in every day to move from the world as it is and towards the world as it might yet be. This coming Friday, the 53rd observance of Earth Day at 5 in the afternoon, I intend to be down at the UW's Library Mall, rallying with some folks trying to imagine that change. Perhaps I will see some of you there. The English Unitarian Beatrix Potter wrote the story that I mentioned at the beginning about that unfortunate squirrel trapped in his nut carriage. Don't worry, he did eventually make it out again. Ms. Potter is famous today for her beautifully illustrated stories for children about mischievous animals and their human-like ways. But she might have preferred to have been famous for her contributions to science. Beatrix had a passion for the study of nature. Her captivating pictures came from examining the woods and meadows where she lived and making careful notes and drawings. Growing up in the 19th century in Great Britain, her possible course through life was narrow and limited. When she submitted a paper to the leading Society of Naturalists in the UK, it had to be read aloud by someone else because a woman could not even attend the meeting. Despite the limits imposed by a sexist society, she found a way forward, putting her gifts to use as an author. An imperfect solution, disappointing, perhaps, yet still very, very grand. In the face of tragedy or injustice, whether global or personal, when the only course before us leaves no room on either side, we have but two choices. The first is to stay where we are. This will generally seem safe because the danger will be of a sort that we have gotten accustomed to. The second possibility is to roll back the stone, to step out into the desert, and to get born as many times as is necessary to truly live. At this season of the renewal of hope, of the remembering of freedom, and of the return of spring, may each of us and all of us together have the courage to move forward towards such a new birth. Each week, we bring ourselves to this time and space, carrying with us all the concerns and joys of recent days. We share these here in a spirit of acceptance and support, knowing that they are held in love. We light a candle for our planet in the week approaching Earth Day this coming Friday, April 22nd. May we give thanks for our home, our source, our very interconnected and interdependent lives, and may we and the rest of our species choose no longer to harm the only world we have. Jim Moss asks us to light a candle of sorrow for the violence this week at the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Al-Quds, that is the city of Jerusalem, a city where Jews, Christians, and Muslims all agree is one of the holiest places in the world, a place where the most sacred spot in Judaism and the third most sacred spot in Islam touch. May this place be free from violence. May everyone who wishes to pray there be able to pray and practice their religion with safety and surety. May the nations of the world study in war no more. And we light a candle in solidarity with the people of Ukraine, both in their suffering and their struggle. Together we yearn for peace for them and for all people, and an end to all wars of conquest anywhere and everywhere on earth. Now, as the rains fall gently on the angry and the fearful, the joyful and the sad alike, and as the earth gives forth its greenery once more, let us turn our hearts towards those who need our care. We think of those whose faces are now wet with tears in this season of falling waters, whether they be tears of grief or lights gone out of the world, or tears of pain for sufferings of others or of their own. May those tears give sustenance to some new possibility, as the spring rains help to melt the snow on the mountaintop and feed the rushing river below. Spirit of hope, current of life that draws us ever onward, teach us to be patient with ourselves and others, and show us courage in our crying. We think also of those who want for the stuff of life in the season of blossoming renewal. May the rebirth of the natural world foretell a rebirth of the human heart as well, a resuscitation of mercy and justice and loving kindness, until to help all who need it is our guiding goal. Spirit of love, heartbeat within every heartbeat, teach empathy to us and help us never to forget it. We think finally of those who are not free in these days that celebrate freedom, whether that bondage comes from outside or within. May every chain be broken, every tyrant deposed, may every yoke be lifted up, and every message of self-hatred be wiped away clear. Spirit of freedom, wind that blows from all directions, unfailing and undaunted, teach us to remake our world into a place where all are free. For ourselves and all the world, and to anyone who is listening, we pray. Amen.
There is a love holding us. There is a love holding all that we love. There is a love holding all. We rest in this love. And now let us rise in body and or in spirit to sing together our closing hymn, number 163, For the Earth Forever Turning. For the earth forever turning, for the skies, for every sea, for our lives, for all we cherish, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the mountains, hills, and pastures, in their silent majesty, for the stars, for all the heavens, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the sun, for rain and thunder, for the seasons' harmony, for our lives, for all creation, sing we our joyful praise to thee. For the world we raise our voices, for the home that gives us birth. In our joy we sing, returning home to our hills of earth.
May we have joy this Easter, joy born of a life well lived. May we have love this Easter, a love stronger than death, bringing healing and new growth into our lives. And may we have peace this Easter, peace that allows us to be open to the newness of the season and gives us reason to sing. Blessed be, go in peace, and please be seated for the postlude.